but there are different sections to it. It's one of these chapters that you really can break down into a few different main topics. The very end of it will be all of the uh, qualities and characteristics of the ideal bhakta, which we won't go through. I want to go through the initial verses of this, and it starts out with a question that uh, Arjuna asks of Sri Krishna, and it's another common theme in the Gita that uh, Sri Krishna will give a certain teaching. He'll emphasize something. So, for example, he'll emphasize in the very beginning, in chapter 2, the deep philosophical concept of the self. Hmm? And then he'll start talking about karma yoga. And then we find that Arjuna gets a little confused. So he'll ask him that now you're saying that one is better, and then you say that the other is better, and I'm getting very confused. And tell me, definitely which one is better. Now, normally we'll find in the case of Sri Krishna and the case of Sri Ramakrishna both, that they'll say it's not a question of one is better than the other. They'll say it depends on the nature of the individual, that some are more suited to karma yoga, some more suited to bhakti yoga, some more suited to jnana yoga. Everyone should meditate, something like that. We find that in chapter 2, that it says that there are two different types of people, and some are more suited to one than the other. Now, in this chapter 12, we'll get a similar question. Arjuna starts with a question. Evam satata yukta ye bhaktas tvam paryupasate ye chap yaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittama. We're gonna get this distinction between those who worship Sri Krishna himself as either the avatar or as the embodiment of the personal God, and those who are more devoted to this idea that of the impersonal Brahman, is Akshaya, this Akshara of Yakta, impersonal, unmanifest, transcendent, absolute reality, pure consciousness. So Arjuna is saying that which one is Yoga Vittamaha, who is really understands yoga. And yoga will take here in a very broad sense, that yoga will just mean this means to union with God, or to the realization of truth for those who are following the path of Jnana Yoga.
Oh.
Now, we'll find that here, Sri Krishna will give a definite answer. There'll be lots of caveats to it, but basically he's going to side here with Bhakti Yoga. And it's not surprising because this is the chapter in Bhakti Yoga, that he's a little bit like Thakur, like Swami Vivekananda also. When he's on one particular topic, he'll emphasize that. Swamiji, used to confuse everybody, even his brother disciples, that they would say, well, yesterday you were saying all this, that bhakti is everything. Today you're saying jnana is everything. And it was whatever he was focused on at the time. He saw the importance of that and emphasized it. Now here we'll find that this is true, but on the other hand, there's a little bit of a preference for bhakti yoga. Just a few people are saying that it's not loud enough. Okay.
You can keep going.
Now, Thakur, when he was asked this question, he would usually give the answer that bhakti yoga, he used to say, is Sahajpad. This is a and we're trying, if anybody doesn't know what's going on, we're trying to adjust the volume a little bit. I think it's the same as it always was, right?
It should be, yeah.
Okay, I think it's right.
Do you want to plug in the external mic?
Oh, if you want. Okay.
We are fine now, Maharaj.
You're fine now. Oh, okay. Okay, so they're okay now. Let me make this a big again. Okay. So Thakur had an expression which he used very often. Bhakti Pat Shahoj Pat. Bhakti Pat Shahoj Pat. So Bhakti Pat, the path of devotion, Bhakti Yoga. He said is this word Shahoj, Sahaja in Sanskrit. Sahaja, generally in English, it's translated as easy, but it really means Sahajanma. It means that which comes along with birth. Yeah. So it's easy because it's natural, that we all have natural emotions, that we all have a natural sense of identification with the body. We all have a natural sense, an understanding of relationships. We all know what it means to love someone. So that way, we get to utilize all of our natural emotions, number one. Number two, we get to start with our natural understanding of the world, which namely is that it's real and that we're separate from others, but can form a relationship with them and can love them and can come closer and closer and attain some type of union with other people. So Shahoj Pod. So it's something natural about it and relatively easy compared to the path of Jnana Yoga. The path of Jnana Yoga, Thakur says that at the very outset, we have to start out with this highest ideal of oneness and a little bit of a sense of the unreality of the world because we can't have any type of attachment. We have to have some natural sense of vairagya, of renunciation and dispassion, which is not natural to the mind. It has to be, so we either have very good samskaras or we've had some experiences when we're young. For some reason, at the very beginning, we don't have much attachment to the world. We feel that this world cannot fulfill us. We want something deeper. And we have a very keen sense of discrimination between the real and the real. So lots of different things. And we have to start out at the end point in Bhakti Yoga. We start out wherever whatever our present understanding is. So that means that the question of adhikara, this is a very important point. We'll get to this. Adhikara, who is qualified to follow a particular path? In the path of Jnana Yoga, the adhikara, one has to have a good amount of dispassion for the world. One should not be very much entangled in the world. It was always associated with sannyasa, that in the early days it was almost reserved for the monks. It was felt that householders shouldn't follow it. Even Thakur, when we get to Thakur, we'll find that his understanding of Jnana Yoga, his understanding of Advaita is a little bit different. He didn't mind for householders to understand, to have that feeling that I am the self. But for a householder to think of this world as a dream, he said, how can they do it? They have their families, they have their household duties, they have their standing in society. It'll be either it won't be helpful or it'll be hypocritical. So that part he didn't like. We'll see that his Bhakti Yoga is really based on Jnana Yoga. I mentioned this last night, this idea of Jnana Mishra Bhakti, which we'll get to a little bit. So he would say, Bhakti Pad Shahoj Bhat, but he would add something else. Tobe Ato Shahoj Noi. This is very, very important. It's an easy path, but it's not that easy. It's not, don't think that we're getting off the hook. We don't have to have any dispassion and renunciation, and we don't have to have this longing for God. We need all of those things. And we're not going to go through it, but I encourage everybody to look at what are the characteristics of the ideal devotee, who is most pleasing to the Lord. And we'll find that it's all of the same qualities that we find in the Sthita Prajna. They're all of the same qualities that we find necessary for the path of knowledge. this oneness, this detachment, this equanimity of mind, being friendly to everyone, compassionate, loving everyone, all of the same things. So it's a great mistake to think that bhakti yoga is something very easy. It's also a mistake to think that it's second class. We're only following the path of devotion because we're not qualified for the path of knowledge. This is also a mistake. So it's really a question of two things. And I'll kind of start with this idea that two ideas that we find again and again in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna when he's talking about what path one should follow. What are these two things? Pratibha?
Is it breaking for anybody else, Maharaj? My sound is breaking.
Oh, you also can't hear.
Is it anybody else or is it my
Some-
computer? Maybe it's
others-
my computer.
Can you
Okay.
hear me? Can you hear me now? Others can hear me.
The sound.
Raise your hand if you can hear. It may be your computer. I don't know. Mashima, can you hear? Where is she?
I can hear.
Okay. Okay, then I think Shukla Dev maybe your computer. I don't know. Let me do this.
Did you Zoom?
Huh?
Did you log twice?
Yeah, maybe log out and log in again. I don't know.
Oh, then that's the problem. Yesterday it happened with me.
Okay. Okay.
Just keep one.
Okay. So two requirements. No. This is not exactly requirements, but how do we choose what path is we're qualified to follow, what path is best for us? Thakur had two things that he used to talk about. Ruchi bhed. Okay, ruchi bhed, that everyone has a different taste. That we some people like sweet things, some people like salty things. Some people like different types. He would give the examples of the mother who buys a big fish. They have these big ruimach, the great big thing. And with some of it, they'll cut off the head and make mori gonto. Yeah. And then they'll take some of it and they'll deep fry it. And they'll take some, they say if stomach's not good, matcha jhol. And then they'll make some sour things. So that Thakur says that the mother has 5 different children and they all like different things. Ruchi bhed. So she'll prepare the fish in the manner that they like. But there's a second thing.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
but you are going to compare with Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. That's two different, very different. One is very hard, one is not.
Okay, we'll
Isn't
get
it?
to that. We'll get to that. Yes. They're both hard.
Yeah, I know, but still.
Yeah. Okay. No, we'll get to that. Okay. Now, second thing that the mother knows is that she may have one child who likes fish prepared in a certain way, like very spicy fish. But every time the child eats the spicy fish, it gets stomach problems. So the second thing is what he calls hojam shakti. Hojam shakti. Georgia pete shoy. He used this expression. Georgia pete shoy. It's a question of what one can digest. So this is the second thing that we may say that, oh, I'm a non-dualist. This is the path that really appeals to me. This world is like a dream. But we go about doing everything. And it's a very hypocritical type of thing. We pretend that I'm not the agent of action, then we do whatever we want. There was one sadhu who came to Sri Ramakrishna. His character wasn't very good. And so he came to Sri Ramakrishna. Thakur said, I hear that you tell lies. He said, if this whole world is unreal, then are only my words to be judged as real? Then that's also unreal. So Thakur said, I spit on that type of Vedanta. Actually, he said something even stronger. But the idea is that something may appeal to us, and yet we're not qualified to follow it. Now, what Renadi said, Mashima, what she said is true with his adhikara, who was qualified to follow the path of devotion. among the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, there was one that Thakur felt 100% secure and convinced that he was qualified for the path of Jnana Yoga, and that was Swamiji and Swamiji alone. Now, I read this, I think it was Swami Saradananda. He said, to a certain extent, Swami Abhedananda and Swami Turiyananda, but otherwise, full this adhikara business, fully qualified was only Swamiji. So what Thakur recommended for people when he said the path of devotion, bhakti, he didn't, his concept of devotion was not something separate from jnana. It was based on jnana. This is why this idea of jnana mishra bhakti. This is what some people say is the real teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. That the type of devotion he taught was based on, there was a philosophical ground for it, and the ground is oneness, and the end is oneness. Now, the traditional teachers of bhakti were dualists. Not all of them. There are, of course, Shakta schools and Shaiva schools, and there are even Vedantists who were devotional Vedantists. We have our Sridhara Swami, we have Vallabhati, we have others like that. But in general, it was felt that path of devotion is a dualistic path. Now, for Sri Ramakrishna, it's not a dualistic path philosophically. It's a dualistic path practically. Now, how can that be possible? If I am one with God, then how do I have a relationship with God? He was a very practical person. He said, it's all because of this sense of I. Now, if we analyze, he said, analyze, try to find this ego sense, look deep within, search for this I. He said, you'll find God in place. You won't find it. If you look for it, you won't find it. If we sit for meditation and we try to still the mind and we try to think, what is there in consciousness that's personal? What is there that has any qualities to it? We won't find any. We'll find an impersonal, absolute reality. If we analyze, we do this vichara. We analyze. Shukladi, can you hear? A little bit. Okay, sorry. So we analyze. We remove the body and the mind, the senses, all these five koshas, and what's left will be the impersonal absolute reality. This sense of I. We had a long class. We're still in the middle of it. No, we finished. Vivek Chudamani, did we finish? We finished. And there's a long section on this Panchakosha doctrine, and they identified the sense of I with the Vijnanamaya Kosha, Shankaracharya. This Vijnanamaya Kosha, that because we can have this higher type of intellect where we can reflect on the nature of the self and everything, the sense of I emerges, and the sense of identification emerges. If we eliminate even this Vijnanamaya Kosha, then there's no scope for any ego sense. Now, Thakur says that this is true, but then he says you may reason 100, 1,000 times. He says you may reason 1,000 times, but the moment you stop that, the sense of I comes back. So he says this is a fact of life. Accept it and utilize it. Take this I, which he compares to a stick lying on the surface of water. Because that stick is lying on the surface of the water, we feel some sense of separation. Now, philosophically, we understand that it's superficial. It's on the surface. It's a superficial separation. That it's not like a wall that goes all the way down, separating one side from the other side. If we look from the top, we can't really tell. If you have an aerial view, you look down and there's a rope. It could be something that goes all the way down and separates. But we know it's just lying on the surface. But it gives a sense of separation. Separation how? Between ourselves and others, and between ourselves and God. Both ways. It works both ways. So he says, utilize that, form a relationship. So what he's really saying is there's only one ocean, Satchidananda. So this is the Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta minus this Jagat Mithya. We don't need this idea that this world is a dream, this world is false, in order to feel oneness with everyone and oneness with God. They're two separate issues. There are many Advaitins, and I will say Thakur is one, because he ultimately believes that the sense of I will disappear in the highest experience. There's no I there. There's only oneness. There's only Brahman. So ultimately, he's an Advaitin from that point of view. But this is another thing that Ruchi Bheda. He didn't like to keep the mind merged or dwelling on this idea of oneness. He liked this idea of separation. He used to quote the song of Ram Prasad that Ami chini kote China ma, Ami chini kete bhalobashi. This is a very interesting thing that Ram Prasad is saying. I don't want to become sugar. I want to taste sugar. I want to enjoy sugar. I want to eat sugar. I like sweets. Now, what he's saying, he's not saying that this idea that I can become sugar is blasphemy. It's wrong. It's false. He's saying, no, it's true, but I'd rather enjoy it. This was Thakur's attitude. He had this attitude for two reasons. One, that was his nature, that he wanted to have the company of the devotees, and he wanted to have the experience of communion with God. Second reason was he had to be in that state, otherwise his mind would go straight up and merge in the absolute. He knew he had a mission in life to fulfill. So for that reason, he had to keep some sense of distinction. This is the Vijnana state. The Jnana state, Thakur explains, the mind is merged in Brahman, absolute oneness. There's no I there. There's no I whatsoever. When the mind comes down, and this is only the incarnations, the avatars, can remain merged in that highest state of samadhi for a long time and bring the mind back down again. He was in that state more or less, off and on, for 6 months. I say more or less because he could get a little bit of body consciousness without really external consciousness, a little bit so he could swallow some food, then mind would go straight back up again. So more or less continuously for 6 months. Now, ordinary human being can't do that. Even the Ishvara Kotis couldn't do it. That's reserved for this, what we call the avatar, however we understand it. So after that, when he came down from that state, we read in the Great Master that the tendency of his mind was to love solitude and to immediately go into that nirvikalpa state. So he would find little tricks to bring the mind back down. And when the devotees would come, he would try to have a little desire to eat a certain type of rasa. Well, no, he would say sometimes fish with eggplant. And he had a little fondness for that. Different things. Different types of things. Yeah. Jalebi was his favorite. That was and puffed rice, yeah, and other things. But anyhow, so this is a question of belief being based on what pleases us, or we have to have a system. We have to have some type of philosophical framework, which can be provisional. It doesn't have to be a final thing. We don't have to be convinced that this is the only way to look at reality. We know, say from a scientific point of view, we know that there's so many different models that we can use that are all good and are all helpful for certain different types of experiments or certain different types of analyses, things like that. And we choose the ones that work best based on what our goal is, right? So in spiritual life also, we have to have some framework. So for Sri Ramakrishna, what he did is a very brilliant thing. He said, we start out with a dualistic type of model, which is grounded on non-dualism. The ground of the personal is the impersonal. The ground of God with form is the formless reality. Right? I get confused with who I talk to and what I say. But you remember the illustration of the vat of dye. Okay, we'll use that illustration now. This is one way how Thakur tried to explain how that infinite absolute reality has to be formless if it can manifest in different forms. So he talks about a man who shows up in a village with a vat, and there's a liquid in the vat. No one can see what the liquid looks like, but he says, everyone, I can dye your cloth whatever color you want. So if somebody says, make mine yellow, he puts it in and it comes out yellow. Somebody says blue, he puts it in, it comes out blue. With whatever color they wanted, he dips it in the same vat. Now, somebody says, he asked, what color do you want? He said, dye my cloth the color of the liquid in your vat. Huh? And everyone laughs. Now, what's funny about it? Why did you laugh? Pratibha? Why did you laugh? Where's the joke there?
Because he has only one color.
There's no color. The joke is that you can't turn a white cloth into colorless. You can't make it colorless. It has to have a color, and the liquid in the vat has to be colorless. If the liquid in the vat is any one color, every cloth will come that color. It has to be clear. You can't take a white cloth and dye it clear. It'll be invisible. Huh? So that means if we want this infinite absolute reality, we have to dive into it. Let the mind, but if we want to take it and utilize it, and it has to take a particular form.
Only the color that comes out of the color light, that's an illusion.
It's not an illusion. It's simply not essential to the water, to the color of the vat. It's not an illusion because it's a manifestation. It's the direct result of dipping the vat. Now, what is the cloth? The cloth is the mind. Huh? If we dip the mind in the thought of God, and any particular form, it'll take that form. Now, this is an idea that we find in Gita also, that Sri Krishna mentions that. I'll read two verses. Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta shraddhaya chitamichyati tasya tasya chalam shraddham tameva vididham yaham. This is one, and it's verse 721. And this says that suppose a devotee wants to worship me in a particular form. So now Sri Krishna, when he says worship me, he'll have to be talking about himself and this transcendent. If he's talking about himself as Sri Krishna, there's only one choice. You worship me as Krishna. But if he's talking about himself as the source of all avatars, as Ishvara or even Brahman, then he can be worshipped in any form. He can be worshipped as a Divine Mother, as Shiva, as Rama, as Ramakrishna, in any form. He says, I make their faith in that. I make that steady. I allow that to take place. He can even say, I'll appear to them in that form. This is, Thakur also has the illustration of the cooling power of the devotion of the devotee, causing the ocean to form different blocks of ice. It'll take the form that they want it to take due to the longing of their heart. But it can merge back into the formless. Now, is that form an illusion? No. But it's not permanent. It's not, there's a subjective aspect to it, but it's real because it's ice, and ice is water. There's a oneness. It still shares the identical properties with the whole ocean and is resting in the ocean. So it's not unreal, but if we take real to mean permanent and unchanging, and that also means nirguna. It doesn't reach that, but it's not it's not pratibhasika. It's not something that's just a dream that'll vanish in what. It's real because we're accessing Brahman that way. It's Brahman itself that's taking that form. It's the ocean of consciousness taking that form. If we go to the pond and we take water in a pitcher, that water will take the shape of that pitcher. There's the nature of water, that it's both formless and takes the shape of its container. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell us, that this infinite absolute reality has the power to manifest itself in infinite ways. And according to our ruchi bheda, according to our taste. So this is one verse. Second verse is ye yatha mam prapadyante tanstateva bhajamyaham mama vatmanuvartante manusha partha sarvashaha. In whatever way people want to approach me, then I'll make that path open for them. That I don't care what name they use. I don't care what form they like. That they're all coming to me. Everywhere. It's not that the worshippers of Durga go to Durga, worshippers of Shiva go to Shiva. We're all going to that infinite absolute reality. So Mama Vatma, there's all that path is always going to be Anavartante. They're traveling that path that will take them to me. All of them, Sarvashaha, in every way. So there's no distinction can be made there. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna emphasized, that we can have a philosophical ground. That means there can be some jnana mixed in with our bhakti, and it should be, and it'll give us a deeper understanding and a better conviction regarding the nature of the self. That I don't have to feel that it's just my imagination. And when I'm worshiping, I'm picturing an image of Sri Krishna. It's not just a mental thing that I've scooped from the ocean of Satchidananda, and I'm using that name. I'm calling it Pani, you're calling it Agua, he's calling it Jal. It doesn't matter. The shape is a little different, but the water is the same. And the water is the essential thing. This is what we're trying to access. The water is what nourishes us. So this is the spring of life. This is what we're trying to get to. So we find that all of these different illustrations go to this point that following the path of bhakti doesn't mean that we can somehow accept Saguna Brahman and deny Nirguna Brahman. We can't. Who is it that has these qualities? It has to be that which exists beyond qualities. The ground of the personal is always impersonal. There was a German philosopher named Hegel, not Hegel, Heidegger. And he said the ground of being is nothingness. Even Sartre said that. Ground of being is nothingness. What does that mean? That anything that's particular, that can manifest in different ways, has to be grounded in something that has no qualities itself. That vat of liquid can't have any color. And we can't dye it. If we want the water in the formless aspect, we have to dive into it. Otherwise, if we want to take it out, it's going to take a form. We should accept that. And we should make it a form that appeals to us. And that allows us to have a relationship. Now we get into this idea of bhavas. Thakur loved this idea that we form a relationship with God. That means that two things. We look upon God in a certain way, and we look upon ourselves in a certain way that that will allow us to have that relationship. And the curious thing is that more emphasis is placed on how I look upon myself than how I look upon God. So in other words, if I like the Dasya Bhava, then when Sri Ramakrishna practiced that, his whole mind was on what? Was it on Rama? No. Whole mind was on Hanuman. He had to become Hanuman in order to know what the real attitude of a servant is in order to worship Rama. We want to worship the Divine Mother, we have to become children. We have to have that mindset. We have to adopt that ego. This is, Thakur uses this terminology of this Kancha Ami and Paka Ami, the unripe green ego, unripe ego, and the ripe ego. And again, in two different senses. Those who can attain to this state of God realization and come back, the big jnanis, that ego will be 100% the ripe ego. For us, this what we're calling the ripe ego is a case of superimposition. I mentioned last night, I mention it all the time because I think it's one of Thakur's most important teachings. He uses this terminology, arop kora, that we have to somehow adopt an attitude, superimpose it. This in Advaita Vedanta, this is a bad thing. This is a type of adhyasa, adhyaropa. They use that expression. It means that we've falsely identified with these coverings of body, mind, senses, and all of that. In Bhakti Yoga, we utilize it. I'm going to identify myself as a child of God. Identify myself with Mother Yashoda in order to be able to worship God as a child. It's not 100% true, but it's 100% effective. And it's not false either, because the sense of I is whatever I think it. What is this ego? It's not a structure, it's not a thing. It's simply how I look upon myself. And it's fluid and it changes. This is one thing about the path of devotion, that as we follow this path of devotion, our understanding of the nature of God, our understanding of the nature of the self, our understanding of the nature of the relationship changes. Everything is provisional. Every step of the ladder is provisional. We leave every rung behind, we go up to the next one. We start as a dualist. Swamiji says this love is like a rope that we pull closer and closer, and we end up with oneness. Start as a dualist in the path of devotion, and that following that, we end with path of knowledge. We have to start out with this idea of oneness from the very beginning. That means we're almost trying to jump from the ground to the roof. It's not easy. But of course, there's truth to it. It's not based on that. There's no Maya here. Now, Thakur makes another important distinction. You may say that there's Maya here, but this is Vidya Maya. It's provisional, it's relative, it's not absolutely true, but it's 100% helpful. And he gives that example. You get a thorn stuck in your foot and you want to remove it. You find another thorn, and with the help of that second thorn, you can remove the first. Then you get rid of both of them. So we have this avidya maya, this thorn of ignorance in the foot. And how do we get rid of it? So this ego that's identified with body, mind, senses, if we can utilize this other ego, higher sense of I, identified with any of these attitudes, I'm a child of God, that itself will enable us to get rid of the other type of ego. Then we can reach that point where we're lying on the lap of Mother, we feel oneness with her, we can even forget our separate identity and just feel oneness. So then we don't need it at that point. But if we discard it at the beginning, we say that this second thorn is also a thorn. How can it be helpful? We get rid of it. We'll spend the rest of our life with the thorn in our foot. What fun is that? So Thakur is very, very practical. This is why that he's saying that path of devotion is a very helpful thing. Okay, so he'll say very clearly, this is the verse 2, Maya Veshamano Yomam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Parayopetas Te Me Yuktadamamataha. Yuktatama. So before we had Yoga Vittama, who is the best versed in yoga. Now we're saying who really is the one Yukta, who is committed, who is firm, who is connected, who really has some good firm basis for their spiritual life. So he says, and now we'll see it's not so simple, that the mind has to be fixed. Aveshya. Aveshya means it enters into something. It has to enter into me, not from a distance. Not that you think about me every once in a while. It enters into, that we have to feel, make the mind merge. Tanmayo bhavet. In Upanishad, we have this phrase. We have to try to get the mind to merge. It comes later also. And nitya yukta, that we feel ever connected. It's not that once in the morning and once at night. We read an interesting thing the other day that, Thakur was teasing Swamiji. Was it Swamiji? I think so. That Swamiji was saying something about, can you bless me that I can remember God all of the time? Now, the Brahmo Samaj, they would have services twice a day. So we said, why are you asking for that? Why not just ask for once in the morning and once at night, like the Brahmos do? He was teasing him. So here it says nitya. That means at every moment. Shraddhaya pareya, with the highest form of faith and reverence and humility and devotion, all of these things. So that's why I say, it's not such an easy thing. Those who can do that. So it's not simply that we say, okay, path of knowledge is too tough. Let me do a little puja in the morning, and maybe I'll listen to some tape and some devotional singing, and that's enough. It's not enough. If we really want to follow this path of devotion, then it also requires 100% effort. Now, he's going to soften this. He's going to say, now, I've just praised them. That doesn't mean that those who follow the other path are making a mistake or anything like that. That they too, aksharam, anirdeshyam, avyaktam paryupasate, sarvatragam achintyam cha kudastam achalam dhruvam, samniyam yendriyagramam sarvatra samabuddhya, te prapnuvanti mameva sarva bhuta hiterataha. Now, there are going to be some strict things for them also. So those who upasate, so those who try to fix their minds. Upasana in the Upanishads doesn't mean worship exactly. It means let the mind dwell. Those who like to let the mind dwell on the akshara, that means the unchanging nirdesya, that's what we can't say anything about, avyakta, unmanifest, who like that, and sarvatra, they see God everywhere, that all-pervading reality, achintya, unthinkable, beyond the mind and senses, kodastam, that's firm, it's not changing. That means the witness within is not affected by anything. Achalam, unmoving, dhruvam, steady and fixed. Then, samniyamya, so we have to, indriya grama, all of our senses have to be under control. So again, all of these very strict things. Sarvatra samabuddhaya, that we see the same everywhere. There's a one-sidedness. They also will reach me. Te prapnuvanti mameva. They'll also reach the goal if they can do all of these things. So we see that there are restrictions for both. There are preliminaries for both. Then sarva bhuta hiterada, that we sometimes think that the jnani can go into the forest, forget the world. The two times in Gita where we find this phrase, sarva bhuta hiterata, identical phrase, are with reference to the jnani. They're the ones engaged in the welfare of all beings. Huh? And bhaktas can also, of course. We see God dwelling in others. We try to serve others. That I see Krishna and I see Sita in every woman, or I'm in every man. If I serve them, I'm serving Sita. We can do it from that point of view also, but from the point of view that the same self dwells within all, they'll also serve all beings. So this is, he's saying, but they'll also reach me, those who fix their minds on the imperishable and all of those other things. Now we'll get the real reason here why he's saying that the Bhakti Yoga is better, or for most people. Kleshoti kataras tesham avyakta satyachetasam avyakta hi kadya dukham dehavadbhir avapyate. That it's more difficult. We saw that why the path of bhakti, because it's a easier path. This is more difficult, and we saw it's more difficult because we have to accept this highest truth at the very beginning, and we have to have a great dispassion for the world. And if we want to be very honest, if we have great dispassion for the world at a young age, we won't get engaged in marriage or career or anything like that. Well, life will be given to this type of path. So it says, greater is their trouble whose minds are set in the unmanifest. For the goal of the unmanifest is very hard. And then it said, dehavadbhir, for those who are dehavad. Now, what does dehavad mean? It has two meanings, and it can be taken in two different ways. One means possessed of a body. That means everybody. Everybody has a body. Shankaracharya will take it the other way, that it means those who are identified, those who are identified with the body. Actually, everybody is identified with the body. That means, and everybody has a body. But the jnani will realize that the sense of identification is false somehow. So it's difficult for everybody, even for the jnani. They have to get over this sense of feeling this identification. And body means not just this physical body. It means the causal body, the subtle body, and the gross body, with all of them. Okay, now these next verses will give us some very practical advice. Yetu sarvani karmani maya sanyasya matparaha. Ananyayena eva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate te shamaham samudharta mrityu samsara sagara bhavami na chirat partha maya veshita chetasam. But those who worship me, doing everything as an offering. So this is, we bring in karma yoga. Karma yoga also has to be based on something. Just as bhakti yoga needs a little, we need some jnana behind it. Karma yoga needs a little jnana or bhakti behind it. And the way we perform karma yoga as a bhakta is doing everything as an offering to God. We don't do it with any selfish motive. We don't do it for any personal advancement or anything like that. We do it simply as an offering. So mayi sanyasya matparaha means that we look upon God as the beginning and end of life, the ultimate aim of life. There's nothing higher for us. Matparaha. Then those who will meditate, fix their minds on me through this type of yoga, ananya. This means that there's no room for anything else. Exclusively, this exclusive type of single-minded yoga, then verily he says, I become the savior out of the ocean of mortal souls. So that means that they'll attain me. They'll have God realization. Okay, now we have, and this is what we'll end with this. I'll try to get through this because it has a very interesting connection with Sri Ramakrishna and Girish Ghosh. And Girish Ghosh, Mayeva mana adhatsva mai buddhim niveshaya nivashishyasi mayeva ata udvam samshayaha. Now, Sri Krishna is going to give us a series of instructions, and we'll have number one, and then he'll say, if you can't do it, then do the next thing. So this is number one, that fix your mind on me, fix your intellect in me, let them both merge within me, and you will dwell within me from here on. There's no doubt about it. It's a very important idea here that where do we live? We live where the mind is. It's not where the body is. If we sometimes we look at somebody and say, "Oh, that where were you just now?" We're daydreaming. We're thinking we're someplace else. So the devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, where will that devotee live? In Thakur's room. In Thakur's room. Those who are greatly devoted to reading this gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and meditating that way, that's where they live. That because the mind is there, when it's involved in other things, it's below the surface. It doesn't disappear below the surface. So that's where we live. He says, make no doubt about it. You fix your mind on me. Somebody says, how can I feel close to God? Think of God. Let the mind dwell in God. Then that's automatically you're close to God. Ata chittam samadhatum na shaknosi mayi stiram. Okay, so if you say, okay, I can't do it. How many people can do it? Keep the mind fixed on God all of the time with a great intensity and everything. It's very difficult. So this Arjuna doesn't have to say, I can't do it. Sri Krishna is going to anticipate. Okay, so suppose you say that I can't do it. Abhyasa yogena tatomam ichaptum dhananjaya. Then practice this abhyasa yoga. So I try to think of you, I sit for meditation, the mind wanders, bring it back. We know it'll wander, bring it back. Keep trying so that it'll stay for a longer period of time. It won't wander so far away or so often. Okay, so then Sri Krishna says, okay, I know what you're going to say. I've been trying this abhyasa yoga business for my whole life. It doesn't work. The mind still wanders. I keep thinking that one of these days it'll stop wandering. It still wanders. So he says, abhyase pi asamatosi. Suppose you can't do that either. That you don't have the capability or the strength or something to make this abhyasa perfectly fruitful. Then he says, mat karma paramo bhava. Then be intent on doing everything for my sake. Now we get to this karma yoga idea. So at least feel that all of your activities are done for my sake alone. Madhartam api karmani korvam siddhim avapsyasi. you'll reach the goal through that also. It's not that if you can't do all of these other things, then you're stuck. He says, if you do performing action, madartam, for my sake, even doing it that way, siddhim avapsyasi, you'll attain perfection. You'll reach the goal. Now, he's again anticipating that Arjuna will say that every moment I'm engaged in doing my work, how can I remember all the time I'm doing it for you? We remember Narada had to carry that bowl of oil or milk, whatever it was, all around the world. And Narada asked him, how many times did you think of me? He said, think of you. My whole mind was fixed on getting the job done. Where was the time? So then we get this last thing. So it's suppose you say you're incapable of even that. Kartum madhyogam ashrataha, then take shelter with me and perform all of your actions. Sarva karma pratyagam tata kuru yatatmavan. Then renounce the fruits. So say, I did all of my work. I forgot it's all supposed to be an offering. I got engaged in the work, this and that. Now I finished. Let me lay it at your feet. I don't care for anything. I only want you to be the recipient of that. So we're going down the list. Now, number one is the most important, we think. We can't do it. Number two, we can't do it. Number three, we can't do it. Number four. Now, this is the kicker. This is the most interesting verse. Shreyohi jnanam abhyasa jnana dhyanam vishishyate dhyana karma pratyagas tyagat shantir anantaram. Now, he's saying, better indeed is knowledge than blind abhyasa. So he's saying, okay, the number two is not as good as number one. I'm agreeing with that. Then a meditation with knowledge is more esteemed than mere knowledge. Okay, so we're still sticking with that. Then meditation, renunciation of fruit of action. So now we say, well, actually number three is better than the others so far. That's better to do this, get rid of the, renounce the fruit of actions. Then peace immediately follows renunciation. So Tyaga was our fourth choice. And now he's saying that this is the key. Now, what does it mean? It means, first of all, we won't be able to reach that stage of letting go until we've tried everything else. This is a Thakur story of the bird on the mast of the ship. The bird falls asleep when the ship is moored by the shore. When he wakes up, it's out in the middle of the ocean, doesn't know what direction to fly, and flies in every direction, hoping to find land, gets too tired and comes back and rests. And after going in every direction, there are four directions. One direction will be what? Yeah. One will be the first choice, fix your mind on me. One will be renounce all the fruit, all of it. So we have to do everything. Abhyasa yoga will be one direction. And then finally the bird says, what can I do? I'll take shelter with the ship. Wherever the ship takes me, then I'll go. Give up everything. So Sri Krishna and saying that this Tyaga is the real main teaching of Gita. What did Totapuri tell Sri Ramakrishna? What is the meaning of Gita? What you get when you repeat 10 times Gita, Gita, Tagi, becomes Tagi, 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 which is almost synonymous with Tyagi, with so someone who can renounce everything. So we may say that why bother with meditation and all of these things? Why not just practice Sharanagati? Sharanagati comes at the end. And we don't get there unless we exhaust every possible means that we can try. And it's not just, we can say, well, our meditation, all of that, that's just flapping our wings to get tired. No, the whole time we're doing that, we're purifying the mind also. We're allowing us to reach that stage of Tyaga. But then through the Tyaga Shanti Anantaram, immediately, think of the kite with the big fish in its mouth. That second that it drops the fish, all of the crows that were making its life miserable, they leave instantly. Now, I want to just read.
In that respect, surrender is above Tyaga. In that respect, surrender is higher than Tyaga.
Tyaga and Sharanagati will be the same here. Sharanagati is more of a devotional point of view. But Tyaga here really means letting go. And letting go means acceptance. It means reliance. It means taking shelter. It can also renunciation and everything. Now, I'm just gonna, we'll have a little time for questions, but I want to read. This is from the great master. We all know about Girish Ghosh, that he was very headstrong, that he didn't want anybody to tell him what to do, that he didn't want to be disciplined in any way. He never knew when he would wake up, go to sleep, when he would be sober, when he would be drunk. But he had such tremendous faith in Sri Ramakrishna that one day, completely out of character, he asked him for some spiritual advice. Now, the other thing is Girish was very honest. He won't agree to something that he knows he can't do, and he won't pretend anything if it's not true. So this is from the great master. One day, Girish offered himself completely to Sri Ramakrishna and said, "What shall I do from now on?" The master said, "Go on, be doing what you have been doing. Now keep to both sides, this side meaning God, and that side meaning the world. When one side, that is the world, drops off, whatever is ordained to happen will happen." Girish wanted to, renounce the world. Thakur had kept a cloth for him. When he gave to all of the future monastics, he left one for Girish. But continue to remember and think of him every morning and evening. So, Mayeva mana adhatsva, my buddhim niveshe. So the same thing. He's telling him the same thing. Keep the mind fixed on me. So continue to remember things. Well, he's saying God, of course, to think of him every morning and evening. Saying this, he looked at Girish as if waiting for a reply. At this, Girish was sad and thought, "The nature of my mind is such that I cannot keep regular time, even for satisfying my daily physical needs, such as eating, drinking, sleeping, etc. I'm certain to fail to remember and think of God morning and evening. Oh, what a calamity. It will be very wrong to transgress Sri Guru's words, and evil will certainly befall me. So how can I agree?" So it goes on. So he can't agree. So he hesitates, and then Sri Ramakrishna understood that. And then Thakur said, he said, finally the Girish remained silent. The master looked at him, and knowing his thoughts, he said, "Very well. If you cannot do that, remember him once before taking food and once before going to bed." Okay, so Girish is silent. All of these internal ideas are coming, and then Thakur says, "Okay, you will say, I cannot do even that." Exactly what we have here. You will say, "I cannot do even that." Very well. Then give me the power of attorney. So the power of attorney means that I'm renouncing my will. I'm taking shelter, sharanagati. Now, this is very interesting because we think that we've come to the last one. It'll be the easiest. It's not the easiest. This was to Girish's liking. His mind was now calm, and there swelled in his heart an infinite onrush of love for and reliance on the master for his infinite grace. He felt relieved that the bondage of rule, which was a terror to him, was now gone forever. It was now sufficient to have the firm faith that whatever he might do, the master would save him some way or other by his divine power. Giving the power of attorney to the master meant then to Girish nothing more than this, that he would not have to give up anything by means of personal efforts or to bother about spiritual practices, and that the master would remove the last vestige of worldliness from his mind through his own powers. But he did not then realize that he had put voluntarily round his neck a noose of love 100 times stronger than the bondage of rule, which he thought was so unbearable. He thought he was getting out of all of this other stuff. He did not then dive sufficiently deep, nor had he the power then to realize that whatever be the circumstances, good or bad, he might find himself in, whatever be the fame or infamy that might attend him, agonizing be the pain or misery that dogged his steps. And he had children that died. He had a wife, a lot of tragedy in his life. He had nothing more to say or do than to bear them all without a murmur. All other thoughts vanished from his mind, and he was feeling the endless grace of Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, a new ego rooted in Sri Ramakrishna was born and was fast developing in him. It goes on and on. Days passed away. Girish met with various calamities, all of these things. And then what happened was, uh, Girish ended up telling the others. I don't see it here, but he said to Narendra and the others, he said, your spiritual practice has a beginning and an end. You can sit for meditation 2-3 hours, whatever. You get up, that meditation is finished, you start something else. There's no beginning or end to mind. Thakur said, Giri said one day, I have to leave now. I have to go to the theater. I have some work to do. He said, no, you can't say that. You can say, if it's God's will, I'll do it. And then he said, oh, every second I have to think, is it this wretched ego that's making me do these things? Or am I trying to follow some higher divine purpose, will within, of what would Thakur want me to do? What would the Divine Mother want? He said, then I realized that every second of my life, I had to think, is it this wretched ego that's making me do it? Some selfish purpose? Or am I really following this teaching? Have I really renounced this ego? And I'm just giving God my power of attorney. So this is a very beautiful way that this particular section of chapter 12 dovetails with his great teaching about giving the power of attorney. Anmoktaridao. We find this over and over in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, that if we give our power of attorney to a good person, we don't have to question anything. That means if we say, all right, mother, do with me what you will, that whatever you do, I'll accept is best for me. That giving the power of attorney means that I feel that I'm not in the proper state of mind to make the best decision for myself. Either because of old age or illness, whatever it is. Here it's because of spiritual immaturity, that we give the power of attorney to Sri Ramakrishna or to Divine Mother, or however we understand it, that we have to assume that their decision will be both final and the best decision. So that way we're relieved of anything. We're relieved of any anxiety, of any worry, anything like that. Tyagat Shantir Anantaram. Immediately we let go of all of this and peace comes to us. Okay, so I'll stop here, and now whoever would like to ask any questions or make any comments related to this, or if not to this, it can be anything about spiritual life. Don't be shy. Okay. You're muted still. Yeah.
Maharaj, I have a question. This has always been my confusion, always. This in before 12, I thought I understood that there were four items. One was to be always concentrated. If you cannot, keep on practicing. If you cannot, do whatever for me. If you cannot, give all fruits. I thought these were the four.
Yes.
In 12, though, the comparison first is that if you, better than abhyasa, which I thought was item 2, is better is jnana. Jnana
it doesn't follow exactly.
Yeah.
We can take the first few kind of as a block.
Yeah. So
the main thing will be that taking shelter will be higher than all of them. If we think that the one is higher than the other, that's okay. But ultimately we'll find that this tyaga, this renunciation, doing everything as an offering, taking shelter, giving power of attorney will be the highest. So don't get confused, because you're right. You're right. It does seem that 1 and 2 get a little reversed at some point.
I have a question, Swamiji.
Yeah, sure.
This is Abhijit. Yeah.
Hi, Abhijit.
So in the parable of the bird on the mast, you mentioned that that tyaga cannot be done till we exhaust all the other ways. And in the story of the Updeshas to Girish and the Ghosh by Sri Ramakrishna, he kind of manages to just directly go to surrender without having to go through all of these other ways. So it is a little bit of opposite to what the story, the parable of the mass says.
Yeah, we can say that Girish goes, practice all of the others to the extent possible for him, which was minuscule or not or non-existent. So this is a general rule, but everyone will be different. Huh? There'll be some that are not at all interested, or maybe qualified, but not at all interested in deep type of meditation. For them, it'll be more devotional practices, this and that. The point that we want to get to is that some effort has to precede grace. The Purushakara has to come first. That however that effort manifests itself, that we have to before it's karma uchyate, that if we want to reach a certain state where we can renounce, we have to do something, or make some effort at least. Girish is making some type of an effort, even to give up drinking and to try to follow. He's making, for him, tremendous effort. That wasn't an easy thing.
We don't know how much he has done in his previous
And we don't know, yeah, we don't know what samskaras are there and other things like that. So at least some type of effort, and then shamakaranutate. Then we reach that level, and at that point, then we have to let go, because we have to give up this ego sense. This is the main thing. Even this feeling that I am striving to realize God will be a subtle type of barrier for us, obstacle for us. So we have to give up that, and ultimately, this sharanagati. See how everything is different. For some person, this final rung of the ladder is sharanagati, very calm, quiet, letting go. Whatever you do, mother, is fine. For others, Thakur's final rung wasn't sharanagati; it was vyakulata. It was, you have to reveal yourself to me. I'm dying. I'm drowning in the ocean. I'm ready to cut my throat. You have to reveal yourself. So everyone's path is a little bit different. These are kind of generalizations, and we can understand that for some, the effort will manifest in one way. For some, they may have done it before. For some, their ability to do spiritual practice is less. Some people are very fortunate that because they're incapable of doing much, they can easily take shelter and say, I can't do anything, mother, you have to look after me, I'm a small child. So because of their spiritual attitude and the type of ego that they adopt, they may not have to do exactly the same type of hard spiritual practice as others. So, prarabdha karma, of course, prarabdha karma will manifest as good samskaras or bad samskaras. That's how it will manifest with us. That will make us better fit for certain types of spiritual practices.
Excuse me, Swamiji. This
Okay.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
So, Swamiji, can you break it down on a daily basis if you have to take a decision? Any example? How do we give power of attorney, and how do we know that it's a decision from God? Because ultimately we have to take a decision.
Okay.
So
This is a very, very good question. Excellent question. Actually, we don't decide. We don't decide. Thakur is very clear about this, that we reach a stage where everything falls off. We become incapable. He gives the example of the daughter-in-law who becomes pregnant, and she doesn't decide. Little by little, I'll stop my work, this and that. The mother-in-law decides. So in the final month, when she's ready, getting close to giving birth to the child, mother-in-law removes all of her duties from her. So Thakur says that these things fall off on their own. We have two stages. He talked about Vaidhi Bhakti and Anuraga. Or he uses Raga Anuraga, he uses different terms for the two different types of devotion. Vaidhi Bhakti is all effort that we have to, the preliminary beginner stage, that we have to have a very strict schedule. We have to follow it with great devotion and determination. We do our regular spiritual practices. And somebody says, well, when do you know when you reach the point where you can stop doing it? And the answer is that when we're incapable of doing it, because the mind is going to God. So Thakur said, when can you stop doing the Sandhya? He said, when repeating Gayatri, we feel some ecstasy. When can you stop repeating Gayatri? When simply reciting Om, we go into some high. So these things will automatically happen. We don't decide. If we decide, it will be deciding too early.
Yeah.
So we have to continue. And this beginning stage, suppose we have a ladder with 100 rungs. This beginning stage will be probably the first 97, 98 rungs. And this final stage of Anuraga, that'll be maybe 98th, 99th will be the Akulata, something like that. And then we can get to the roof after that. So the beginning stage is a long stage. And we should feel proud to say, yes, I'm the beginner in spiritual life. I'm still in that stage where I'm doing my spiritual practice like everybody else is, with great faith, with great devotion, with great dedication. And if by Thakur's grace, that a time comes when it becomes impossible. Thakur, he tried to do japa one day with Hazrat Mala. And he said, no, I can't. Let me try with my left hand. Oh, I can do it a little bit. But he couldn't do these things. He couldn't, everything fell off. Because he had reached that stage of Anuraga, that intense love for God. So we have to just keep plugging along, assuming rightly. At the same time, we practice this, giving the power of return to God. We practice it in the sense that I'm trying as hard as I can. Whatever comes, I accept.
Yeah.
I accept. And we utilize it with our karma yoga also. So it's not that that will come without preparation at the end. We're working towards this perfect acceptance and renunciation.
Thank you, Swami.
Swamiji, I have a question.
Okay.
Like Thakur says that for all householders particularly, that first know God and then,
Okay. Thakur tells everybody, first realize God, then live in the world. Impossible. Yeah. So we have to filter that into some realistic idea. So we can say, first get established in spiritual life. First have some ideal. First, he says, if the mind mixes with the world before we've let it settle, then he says it's like milk and water. If you put milk and water, it'll completely get mixed in it. If you take that milk, you do by some hard effort, you turn it into curd. If you let it sit for a while in a solitary place and it turns to butter afterwards, or I don't know, I got the steps mixed up. So first you let it sit, then you turn it into butter. Then you put that butter in the water and it won't mix with it. So getting butter in our case doesn't mean God realization. It can't. Otherwise, no one will live in the world. Who will do it? Huh? So we have to say that we have to get established. We have to have priorities. This is a brahmacharya stage of life. We have to understand what the goal of life is. Once we've done that and we live in the world, we won't be overcome by the world. Huh? We'll have some anchor, something to hold on to. Thakur gives a nice illustration that is like a big pillar. If we wrap our arms around it, we can spin around, we won't fall down. If we spin around without it, we'll get dizzy and we'll fall down someplace. So I think we have to take it that first get established in spiritual life, have some spiritual practice, have some conviction regarding the goal of life, all of these things. Then when you go to do your household duties and everything. So this is the brahmacharya stage of life. He's not saying that, okay, you've already married, you have your career and everything, now stop. And this is something that should be done early. But suppose we come to spiritual life later, then we start at that point. That's all. We start at that point. But otherwise, we'll get depressed and say, oh, you want me to realize God first before I even get involved in the world at all? How can I think that that's possible? So I take it as this other way, that get established in spiritual life, have a goal in life, have some conviction regarding these things, have a plan for your life. Understand that everything that we're doing in the world, we're doing as an offering, And this is to help the mind, to purify the mind. And when we can let go of that and hold on to God with both hands, that means when we get to the retirement stage of life. This also fits in with the stages of life. Then we will be prepared and we'll be able to do it at that point.
Maharaj, Prasuna has a question.
Good.
She is asking, in the example of the dye and coloring the fabric, does it mean there is no color in the tub and the color one sees is one's own perception?
I would say that the color of the liquid in the vat will have to be the color of water. Huh? You know, there was a book that was entitled The Color of Water. It's a very interesting book. It's not a spiritual book exactly, but it's about a Jewish woman from Poland who comes to the United States and somehow connects with the African American community and marries an African American man. Actually, he dies young and she marries another one. And she virtually becomes part of that community. And it was written by her son, one of her two children. The son is a little confused because he thinks that his mother's African American, yet she's white. And then he's very confused. And he says, then I see father is black and you're white. He says, what is the color of God? And she says, God is the color of water. Right? A beautiful answer. God is the color of water. That means it has no color. So it's that's the infinite, absolute, impersonal reality on which everything else is grounded. This is why I say that water is formless, but if we say it's only formless, then we're missing the whole point, that it takes the shape, whatever we want. And we can also say it takes whatever color we want it to be with this vat, this dyed issue. So it's not imaginary. It's a little bit arbitrary and a little bit subjective. So if I say that I'm taking water in a pitcher, and I say to somebody else, you know the real shape of water? It's the shape of this pitcher. That's the absolute final truth. Suppose we freeze it and we break the pitcher and it comes out the shape of the pitcher. We say that God, this is the form of God and only this form. You have to worship God in this form. And somebody says, but I used a different container, and when I break it, freeze it, I say it looks something different. Aren't they both water? So it's not imaginary, but it's not absolute. And it's the form that we want to see the water take. That is the most helpful for us. Yo yo yam yam tanum, whatever form appeals to us, that we want to see that way, the water can take that form, and the absolute can take that form for us. So a little bit of subjective and objective. We have two ways of looking at it. One, God will reveal himself or herself in the form that we most want to see. That puts the onus on God, a little bit more objective. The other is that we see God in the form that we want to see. That makes it a little more subjective. It's a combination, subjective, objective. These are terms that lose their distinctiveness a little bit. We see both sides of it. A little bit, of course, is subjective. We all know that if somebody says, how do you think of God? We say that God is merciful. This is my idea. Some people say, well, God is a jealous God. God only cares about justice. Somebody say God is compassionate and loving. We know that we're taking qualities that we like to see on God and we're attributing them to God. Doesn't mean that they're not real. They may be real, but it's all limited by our personal understanding of these things. And the real nature of the absolute, personal, impersonal, nobody can say in any absolute way that what I say is right, what you say is wrong. Thakur said it so many times. Everybody thinks that my watch keeps the right time. There's nobody's watch keeps the right time. The sun alone is the real one. When it's directly overhead, it's noon. That's the beginning and the end of it. Doesn't matter what anybody's watch says. Huh? So we may say that somebody's conception of God is not as appealing or doesn't make as much sense as somebody else. It's not complete relativism. What anybody says is fine. It should be a little bit of with this understanding of kind of liberal idea that God can be perceived in many different ways, but no one. What did Thakur say? Iti kora jaina. You can't say it's exactly this. Put it in quotes, beginning end, etch it in stone, and say that's it. This is what God is like. Everyone will have their own understanding. God will appear to people in different ways, or will have different conceptions. It's fine. We're getting the water. This is the main thing. It doesn't matter what the name that we give it. It doesn't matter the container that we use. We're getting it, and it'll come in the form that we want it to come in. I prefer to take the water with a pitcher. I don't care for a bucket. Huh? The pitcher has a beautiful shape to it. So the subjective aspect is there. Doesn't mean imaginary. It doesn't mean unreal.
Is subjective, could it be bhavna in this context?
Subjective means thought. Subjective means the way we understand things to be, or the way we'd like them to be. This is the other point I've been trying to make, that our belief system is based as much on what we like to believe, what we want to believe, than what we really think is true. It's an odd statement, huh? But suppose, this is the example I usually give, that that I say that whatever happens to me is for the best. This is part of my belief system, that Divine Mother is there, whatever happens is for the best. Or suppose I say whatever happens is due to my own karma, that I can't question it, I can't bemoan, I can't cry and weep and wail about it, that it's all my own fault, that it's because of my own karma that this has happened, therefore I have no anxiety and no worry about it. Now somebody says, do you believe that 100%? I'll say, how do I know? It's a nice theory. And you really believe, Divine Mother, there's somebody looking down and saying, oh, now I'll have this happen, now I'll have him trip over there, now I'll have him break his arm, I'll have this. Do I really believe that the world works that way? Not exactly, but I like this attitude. Jamon bhab temni labh. According to our attitude, so is our gain. So we don't, because we have to, ultimately we come to this conclusion that there's no way we can know how things actually work. How much of it is Divine Mother's will? How much of it is karma? How much of it is chance? How much of it is random? We can't know. There's no way of knowing. Some people will say, I'm convinced it's this way. Other people will say, I like to think of it this way. Huh? Why Thakur, he never said that it's wrong to call this world unreal like a dream. He said, I don't like to call this world unreal like a dream. It wasn't to his liking. Not that he said that, yeah, from one point of view, for the jnani, it makes sense to say that. I can understand that. He's not denying that that's also a viable way of looking at the world. But he's saying, I don't like to call it unreal like a dream. So this, what we believe in, what we accept, has to do with what appeals to us. Ruchi bheda. What tastes good? Huh? What tastes good to us?
Maharaj, right after that Ruchi Beda, you also mentioned the bhajana. What was that, the other way of?
Hazam. In Hindi, I think they say hazam. Hajmali. Hajma. Yeah. This is the power to digest. So that means that not only do we have to like a spiritual path, but this is also the adhikara. This is what we mean by adhikara. Are we qualified to follow that path? This is one advantage of the path of devotion. Everyone is qualified if they have some level of sincerity, if they have some level of longing, some degree of leading a pure life, purity of heart. That's all. The adhikara for them is very simple. For the jnani, adhikara means that you have to go through a lot of other things. this Vairagya, Viveka, all of this, and they want you to have studied scripture and to have some deeper understanding, Vedanta. A lot of preliminary things are there that you have to have titiksha, nishanta, a whole list, a long list of things. It's forbearance and keen sense of discrimination, dispassion, vairagya, all of these things. So this is the second thing, adhikara. He uses Bengali hojam shakti, the power to digest. I like a certain type of food, but it doesn't agree with me. So I can't do it. I have to try something else and sometimes we learn to like things. This is another important thing. This is the definition of a sattvic happiness. That in the beginning, Vishamila, the beginning is like poison. And pariname, amrita, upamam, at the end it tastes like nectar. So sometimes the guru will say, okay, it doesn't taste good, but keep trying. So there's, Thakur used to quote some song that, what is this disease that I have? I have no taste for the name of God. Huh? Now, what is the cure? You go repeating it. You'll find you'll develop a taste for it. So it's to such an extent that you can't live without it. So this is abhyasa that we practice it. Abhyasa works. In abhyasa, there are tremendous results. Not exactly the way we expect them to be. But we continue with our spiritual practice, our meditation, our japa, tremendous results come. Yes, we don't in unexpected ways. I gave a talk once on the fruits of meditation, and it was based on this very nice incident in the life of Swami Ramakrishna. Maybe he did it many times. That while the monks are meditating, he would leave a little sweet or fruit, something in front of all of them. Then when they came to him in the morning, he said, "Did you get the fruits of your meditation?" Huh? As if to laugh and say, you expected it to be one way, it wasn't exactly what you expected. So the same thing with us, that after a lifetime of failed meditations, we wake up one day and find that tremendous devotion has come. And this nishtha, this tremendous love for our spiritual ideals comes even through what we think is this type of meditation where the mind is wandering, this and that. We get tremendous results from all of that. So time to stop. Sushmita, Hari?
Okay, Maharaj.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And we meet tomorrow at
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, Maharaj.
10 o'clock. Okay, and that goes till 11:15, and then we have a half hour for the kids.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So okay, Hari Bhai, you want a final chant? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, Meta.
Namaskar.
Okay.
Pranam Maharaj.
Vasudeva sutam devam kamsachanuramardanam devaki paramanandam krishnam vande jagadgurum. Om shanti 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 harihi om tat sat. Sri Ramakrishna arpanamastu.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and hope to see you again tomorrow.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
I just want to tell you something. Shukladi, is she there?
She's there.
Yeah. So if there is a problem with the Zoom, she can go to the YouTube link, and there Asuna is watching that, and there is no sound problem there. So I gave you the link in the
Please,
chat.
You are trying to send me the link, I think. Once I, went out and booted the computer again, it was a little better. But please send me the link too. That would be so nice. If you send to Swamiji, he will send it to me, won't you, Maharaj?
Why don't you put in the chat your email? Can you put it? Can you put your email address in the chat?
Then what do I do? I did chat. Then what do I do?
Then you type.
Then I type.
Yeah, start typing.
Hello, Sushmita ji.
Hi, Gita. Hi. Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay.